Welcome, curious learners, to the Deep Dive.
Great to be here.
Today, we're embarking on what's going to be an exciting multi-part journey. We're tackling a real classic of high-tech marketing. Geoffrey A. is Crossing the Chasm.
Absolutely, a foundational text.
Yeah, and this deep dive, it's designed to give you a kind of shortcut, right, to understanding the model that explains how these new disruptive technologies find their way.
Or often don't.
Exactly, or often don't find their way into the mainstream. We're going to try and pull back the curtain a bit on the technology adoption life cycle itself.
Exploring those, predictable social dynamics that really govern how innovations are received, how they're adopted, and ultimately whether they thrive or just fizzle out.
Yeah, fizzle out's a good way to put it.
Yeah.
So our mission, really, in this first installment,
Yeah.
what are we trying to nail down today?
Well, the goal today is really to introduce the core framework, the technology adoption life cycle. We want to focus on the fundamental differences between those, let's call them early enthusiasts.
The ones who jump right in.
Yeah, the ones who embrace the new ideas, and then the pragmatic mainstream, the folks who often hang back, hesitate a bit.
Okay.
And we'll explore why the strategies that really captivate that first group can completely, utterly fail with the next one. It creates this critical gap.
The chasm.
That's the one, that gap that so many promising technologies just never manage to bridge.
Think of it like we're peeling back the layers, trying to figure out why some brilliant new ideas just catch fire, while others, maybe equally brilliant, they just seem to sputter out before they ever reach a wider audience. What makes that jump so incredibly difficult?
It's a great question.
We're going to unpack that for you, hopefully give you the tools to understand not just what happens, but maybe why it happens.
And what it means, really, for everything from, product launches to maybe even social movements. It's broader than just tech.
Definitely feels broader.
Yeah.
Okay, so Geoffrey Moore's book, it's specifically about high-tech companies, right? Silicon Valley stuff
Yeah.
originally.
That's the starting point, yeah.
But he makes the point pretty quickly that the lessons go way beyond just tech. Why is that? What does this idea of high-tech as a microcosm actually mean for us, no matter what field we're in?
Well, what's really fascinating, I think, is Moore's argument that high-tech acts like a perfect lens, almost like a concentrated laboratory to understand much broader industrial sectors, even societal shifts. He argues that the basic relationship, that dynamic between an early market and a mainstream market in tech, it's directly analogous, like a parallel to the dynamic between a fad and a trend in basically any industry.
A fad versus a trend. Okay, that makes sense.
And it really raises an important question for all of us, doesn't it? How many times have you seen something just explode in popularity? A new restaurant, a fitness craze, a social media thing.
Oh, all the time.
Even a political idea, maybe, and then it just disappears almost as quickly. Well, often it's because it just couldn't make that leap, that leap from the niche excitement, the initial buzz, to widespread, sustained adoption. It couldn't become a trend.
So you're saying that the crazy speed of tech, new products coming and going constantly, it's like watching the same pattern on fast forward.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It shows us these universal patterns that apply to almost anything new, whether it's a niche fashion line or some new diet plan. It implies that these fundamental hurdles, these social dynamics of adoption, they aren't just for software or gadgets.
Right.
High tech just experiences it all faster, more intensely. The wins and losses are just more visible, more quickly.
Which makes it a great place to learn from.
A potent learning ground, yeah. It offers a kind of predictive model for any business or social thing that involves big change and needs people to adopt it.
So studying tech gives you almost like a cheat sheet for navigating change anywhere.
In a way, yes. You leverage tech's intensity to kind of foresee these broader market shifts. It's about using that microcosm to understand the macrocosm.
That's a really valuable perspective. It makes the tech world feel less isolated, more connected to everything else. And the insight isn't just about spotting fads, is it? It's realizing that the very nature of a fad, what makes it exciting initially, might actually be what stops it from lasting. The real challenge is that complete transformation, that metamorphosis you mentioned.
Precisely. And think about the implications. Any new product, service, maybe even a social movement has to deal with this. If it only appeals to a small, really passionate group that's your fad audience, how does it actually gain broader acceptance? How does it become a trend that sticks around?
Right.
The core problem, Moore points out, is you often need to start with a fad, exploit it. which sounds maybe a bit cynical,
You
but
exploit the energy, maybe.
exploit the energy, yeah. Use that initial excitement and then turn it into a trend. But that transformation, that turn, is incredibly tough.
Why?
Because it requires, as Moore puts it, antithetical techniques.
Antithetical, meaning completely opposite.
Exactly. Opposed. The things you do to get those early, passionate folks excited might actually hurt you when you try to reach the bigger, more cautious market.
That's so counterintuitive, isn't it? Especially if
Yeah.
you're an entrepreneur and you've just had some initial success. You'd think you just need to do more of that.
Right. But it's often the opposite. What works for the fad, the novelty, the raw potential, maybe that hint of exclusivity, focusing on just how new it is,
Uh-huh.
that can actively undermine your efforts to build something sustainable, widely adopted. A trend needs reliability, it needs social proof, it needs easy integration, it needs to focus on proven value.
Like that diet example you mentioned. The initial excitement might be huge for people who love trying new things.
Mm-hmm.
But for it to become a real lifestyle change for most people, it needs to be practical, easy to stick with, show long-term benefits.
Exactly. It has to meet the needs of that mainstream pragmatist we'll talk more about.
You see this everywhere. Fashion trends, Some styles are loved by a small group, but they never break through because they're just too edgy, maybe too impractical for everyday life.
Or early social networks, remember Friendster, MySpace? They had passionate users.
Yeah.
But only a few, like Facebook later on, managed to simplify things, build features that appealed to a much broader, less techie audience.
They crossed that chasm.
They did. The underlying social and psychological stuff Moore talks about, it's definitely at play in all these cases.
Okay, so to really get this, we need to be clear about the kind of innovation we're dealing with, right? Because not all new things are the same challenge.
Precisely. It's not just about being new. It's about how much new you're asking your customer to handle.
Okay, so the book highlights this term, discontinuous innovation. That seems to be where the real challenge lies. Can you walk us through what that actually means? How is it different from just, a simple upgrade?
Yeah, this really raises an important question about how we perceive change, and maybe more importantly, how we absorb it. There's this spectrum, you could say, of how much behavioral adjustment a new product demands. Discontinuous innovations, they aren't just minor tweaks making something a bit faster or cheaper. They fundamentally require users to learn new ways of doing things, adopt totally new habits, maybe even embrace entirely new infrastructures underneath it all.
Right.
This is what the book calls the price of modernization. It's the toll, if you like, that businesses eventually have to ask customers to pay if they want to introduce something truly transformative.
So it's not just making my phone camera slightly better.
Yes.
It's fundamentally changing how I, say, communicate or manage my finances. That feels like a much bigger ask.
It is a much bigger ask. There's more friction. And that distinction is absolutely crucial for understanding why adoption patterns differ so much.
How so?
Well, if a product just does what an old product did, but better think, like you said, a slightly better camera, maybe a faster car, a more efficient light bulb, that's continuous innovation.
Fits right in.
Yeah, it fits seamlessly into how we already do things, our existing behaviors, our mental models. Adoption is generally easier, but if an innovation asks you to fundamentally change your routine, learn a new skill, maybe rely on a whole new system, it creates a much, much higher barrier to entry. And that's where you see different customer types diverge really sharply in their willingness to even engage. That's where the chasm starts to open up.
Okay. Could you give some examples?
Sure. The book has some great ones. Think about contact lenses versus LASIK eye surgery.
Okay, interesting comparison.
Contact lenses, they don't need a whole new medical infrastructure per se, but they demand, as the book says, a whole new set of behaviors from you.
Oh, yeah. The cleaning, putting them in, taking them out.
Exactly. Adapting to having something in your eye. That's a significant daily behavioral change. LASIK, on the other hand, does require a new, specialized infrastructure, the clinics, the doctors, the procedure itself. But once it's done, ideally, it removes that daily behavioral demand. So both are discontinuous, but they ask for different kinds of change, ongoing behavior versus upfront infrastructure and procedure.
That's a really clear distinction. You're not just buying a thing, you're buying into a whole new routine or a significant medical event. It's a bigger commitment either way.
Exactly. Or think about internet TVs when they first came out. They didn't need special glasses like some early VR, but they did require the user to be, quote, digitally competent.
Meaning
Moving beyond just passively changing channels, you had to navigate menus, apps, streaming services. For a lot of people, that was a brand new skill set, a real behavioral shift from how they'd watched TV for decades.
I remember my parents struggling with that initially.
Yeah.
It wasn't intuitive for them at all.
Right. Or, another example, Microsoft's Surface tablet versus a standard laptop, say a Chrome notebook. The Surface could run existing Microsoft apps, which was good. That lowered one barrier.
Familiar.
Yeah. But its Tiles interface, remember that, it demanded users learn a whole new set of conventions, a different way of interacting, managing tasks. That's behavioral change.
I can totally relate.
Yeah.
Even now, when software updates move a button I use all the time, it drives me crazy. It's tiny,
Yeah.
but it's that friction of having to relearn something.
That's a perfect microexample. Even if the new way is technically better, you're forced to break a habit and form a new one.
Yeah.
So if we extrapolate from that, every new demand like this is a friction point. It's a psychological burden, however small, on the user. How many new habits are you personally willing to learn for a new product? How much digital competence are you willing to pick up? How much routine are you willing to disrupt?
Depends on the payoff, I guess.
Exactly. And that immediately hints at why certain early customers are much more tolerant of this friction. They might even find it exciting to master the new thing.
While others just want things to be easy and familiar.
Precisely. They prioritize minimal disruption. So, the greater the behavioral change demanded, generally, the smaller that initial pool of willing adopters is going to be.
Okay, that makes sense.
Yeah.
So keeping those behavioral demands in mind, let's talk about the different markets for these innovations. All right, so the book talks about these distinct markets, the early market and the mainstream market. Who are these people, actually? And why are they supposedly so fundamentally different in what they want from a new technology?
Yeah, this really gets to the heart of the motivation question and risk tolerance, too. The early market, Moore says, is driven by what he calls a visionary's value system.
Okay, visionary. What does that mean?
They're actively looking for a competitive advantage. They want a breakthrough, something that can give them a significant leap forward, even if it means embracing technology that's not fully proven yet. They're excited by the potential.
Got it. And the mainstream.
The mainstream market operates from a very different place, a pragmatist's value system. They want solutions that are already proven, reliable. They want incremental improvements that minimize risk and, crucially, integrate smoothly into what they're already doing.
Wow, okay. So their needs, their expectations, even how much risk they'll tolerate, it sounds like they're almost polar opposites.
They really are, and that's the critical distinction. That fundamental difference is what creates the divide, the chasm.
So the early market folks are the risk takers, the enthusiasts, hungry for the next big thing, always looking for an edge, while the mainstream is much more cautious. They want to see it proven, vetted, simplified first.
That's a great summary. Let's maybe flesh out these two groups a bit more, because understanding them is absolutely key to figuring out strategy.
Okay.
So in the early market, the key players are the visionaries. These are people, or sometimes whole companies, who get genuinely excited by the raw potential of something new and unproven.
They see the future possibility.
Exactly. They're often innovators themselves. They see new tech not as a threat, but as this huge opportunity for a strategic leap. They're willing to take pretty big risks, invest serious time learning new ways of doing things.
Even put up with bugs and imperfections.
Oh, absolutely. Beta versions, clunky interfaces, missing features, they'll tolerate that. Why? Because they can clearly see the strategic advantage it might offer down the line, the potential for a massive leap, maybe even transforming their business or their field.
They want to be first.
They want to be first, not just for bribing rights, but to gain a real substantial edge over competitors. Think of them as the adopters of those fads we talked about, the ones that promise a big, maybe unproven future. They care less about immediate practicalities, more about the grand vision.
Like the people who bought the very first, very clunky smartphones. They saw the potential for mobile computing way before the apps were really there.
Perfect example. Or the companies that jumped into cloud computing when it was still kind of a vague, risky idea, despite all the security worries and integration hassles. Those are visionaries. You often find them in R&D, cutting-edge startups, or maybe they're just hobbyists who love pushing boundaries.
So they're like the scouts.
Yeah.
Going out into uncharted territory, willing to kind of patch things together and put up with a lot just for that promise of a breakthrough.
Yeah.
Driven by the idea.
Exactly. They get value from being early, from that edge, and often just from the intellectual buzz of mastering something new.
Right.
Now, contrast that with the mainstream market. This is dominated by the pragmatists.
Okay, the pragmatist.
These folks are much more cautious, analytical, definitely risk-averse compared to visionaries. They are not interested in promises of some revolutionary future.
What do they want then?
They want solutions that are proven, reliable, and that integrate seamlessly with minimal disruption into their existing operations. They value steady, evolutionary progress much more than revolutionary change.
Small steps forward, not giant leaps into the unknown.
Precisely. They look for solutions that lots of other people are already using successfully. They need that social proof. They want clear, demonstrable, measurable ROI. They're looking for the trends, things that are sustainable, dependable, widely accepted.
So the pragmatist waits for version 2.0, or maybe 3.0. The one with all the kinks worked out, good reviews, and customer support.
Exactly. They want the stable, enterprise-ready version, not the buggy beta. They're often found in established companies, larger departments, or just everyday consumers who prioritize convenience and proven value over novelty. Their main goal is to make what they already do work better, not to invent entirely new ways of doing it.
Okay, so the visionary asks, what could this do for me if I get ahead?
Right.
And the pragmatist asks, what has this done for others like me, and how can I be sure it won't blow up in my face?
Those are fundamentally different questions, and that's the crux of it. What's the biggest danger if a company tries to answer both questions with the same product or the same marketing message? Does trying to please everyone end up pleasing no one?
Yeah, is that a trap?
It's a huge trap. Trying to appeal to both at the same time usually leads to this diluted message, an unfocused product that doesn't really satisfy either group.
How so?
Well, you might look too risky and unproven for the pragmatists. They'll see the visionary aspects and think, nope, not ready for prime time.
Okay.
But at the same time, you might look too conservative, too watered down for the visionaries. They'll think, where's the breakthrough? This isn't exciting enough.
So you fall between two stools.
Exactly. The visionary wants that competitive leap. The pragmatist wants productivity improvement with minimal risk. You simply can't shout about revolutionary potential when someone's main concern is reliability and proof.
Like your example, the visionary grabbing the buggy beta software for its cool features, versus the pragmatist waiting for the stable, widely used version. Their motivations are just worlds apart.
Worlds apart. Which is why one strategy rarely works for both. And this difference profoundly impacts how information spreads and ultimately how sales happen. Because it's not just what you say, it's who says it and, crucially, who's listening.
Okay, so the book really hammers home the importance of word of mouth in high tech.
Yeah.
Why is that supposedly the #1 source of information?
Yeah.
And how does it connect to these different groups, the visionaries and the pragmatists?
Yeah, it's a critical point. When you're dealing with something new, especially something discontinuous that feels inherently risky, people trust their peers. They trust people like them much more than they trust a slick sales pitch or a glossy ad. And you have to ask why. Why this deep reliance on peer validation?
Good question.
The source highlights that word of mouth is, flat out, the #1 source of information for tech buyers. It's crucial right at the start when they're making their long list of possibilities, and it's absolutely critical at the end when they're narrowing down that short list to make the final call. This is especially true for those discontinuous innovations we talked about, where there's just more uncertainty, more perceived risk, and maybe fewer established ways to compare things.
So it really boils down to trust and validation, right? Particularly when the stakes feel high or the path isn't clear. It's not enough for the company to just say it's good.
Nope. Others need to say it too, and those others need to be credible, people you trust.
Yeah.
For word of mouth to really take hold in a market, Moore says you need a critical mass of informed individuals. People who actually meet, maybe at conferences, maybe online, who exchange views, and who basically reinforce the products or the company's positioning.
They create a consensus almost.
Exactly. This organic peer-to-peer validation is just invaluable because it dramatically reduces the perceived risk, especially for that pragmatic mainstream buyer we were talking about.
Ah, okay. So the pragmatists really rely on this.
Heavily. They are far, far more likely to trust a recommendation from a peer, someone in a similar company or role who has already successfully implemented the technology, someone who's been there, done that.
Right.
Than they are to trust a salesperson's claims or some generic ad. This is why a purely sales-driven strategy often struggles to cross that chasm. It just lacks that essential social proof.
And it probably can't address all the practical concerns the pragmatist has, right? The whole product thing you mentioned.
Exactly. A salesperson can promise the world, but the pragmatist wants to hear from a peer how they actually integrated it, what support they needed, what the real-world hiccups were. That peer validation covers the whole experience, not just the core product features.
That makes total sense. Without that network of trusted users saying, yeah, this works and here's how we did it, even the best sales team will hit a wall with the cautious mainstream.
They absolutely will.
It's like, a restaurant that spends a fortune on advertising, but none of your friends have been there or heard anything good about it. Are you going to go? Probably not.
Probably not. You'll go to the place everyone's raving about, even if it's less flashy. Starbucks is a classic example, right? They built their brand for years on quality coffee and the customer experience, largely through word of mouth, before they started aggressively expanding. That trusted reputation was key.
Yeah, that reputation is currency.
It really is. And if we kind of extrapolate that, the early market, the visionaries, they might tolerate direct sales pitches, especially if the salesperson is also a visionary and shares their excitement about the potential. They're willing to take that chance. But the mainstream market, the pragmatists, they need that validation. They need reliability. They're looking for concrete proof, success stories from their peers, not just promises.
So without that social proof, that web of trusted users, the sales team is basically shouting into the wind when talking to pragmatists.
Pretty much. A strategy that focuses only on direct sales, especially one that glosses over the need for a complete, proven solution and peer validation. It's just deeply problematic for crossing the chasm. The sales pitch becomes almost secondary to the social evidence that accumulates around the product.
Okay. So if these markets are so different and word of mouth driven by peers is so critical, what does a company actually have to do internally to make that jump? It sounds like more than just changing the marketing slogan.
Oh, it's way more. It's a profound transformative thing. It's not just a marketing adjustment. The book describes it as almost an internal revolution.
Okay, we keep mentioning this chasm. Let's nail it down. What exactly is it? And what does it really mean for a tech company to cross it? The book uses this phrase, molting process. That sounds pretty intense, like a snake shedding its skin or something.
It is intense, and molting is a great analogy. The chasm is that deep, often fatal gap between the enthusiasm of the early market, those visionaries, and the skepticism, the risk aversion of the mainstream market, the pragmatism. It's not just a little dip in sales or a minor speed bump. It's a critical phase where many, many promising innovations, even after having great initial success with early adopters, just die.
Wow. The graveyard of good ideas.
That's exactly what it is. They die because they just can't bridge that gap. It's psychological, it's strategic, and often it's deeply cultural within the company itself.
Okay, so the molting process.
Yeah.
It's not just a new marketing campaign then.
Not at all. It's a deep, painful internal transformation for the company. Morse says it requires the company to literally stop being itself, stop being the company it was during its early market success.
Whoa, stop being itself. That sounds almost existential for a company.
Yeah.
What kind of fundamental changes are we talking about? This has to go way beyond just tweaking the product, right?
It really does. The transformation is less about refining the product features and much more about fundamentally refining the company's entire approach.
Yeah.
Its culture, its processes, its priorities, even how it rewards people internally. Well, the book talks about a shift away from, quote, celebrating familial feelings and dashing individual performances.
Okay, the classic startup vibe.
Exactly. That close-knit team and formal structure, maybe relying on heroic efforts from a few brilliant individuals, agile, innovative, passionate, often kind of chaotic. That familial feeling is fantastic for brainstorming, rapid iteration, working closely with those first few visionary customers.
But not for the mainstream.
But to successfully serve the mainstream market, the pragmatists, you need something different. You need predictable processes, robust quality control, scalable operations, highly coordinated, orchestrated group dynamics, not just individual heroics.
So moving from improvisation to a well-rehearsed orchestra.
That's a great way to put it. It's a fundamental shift in company culture. It often needs new leadership styles, too, moving maybe from pure charisma to more coaching, more process-driven management. You have to standardize things, document things, institutionalize ways of working that used to be just fluid and informal.
So the very DNA of the startup has to evolve. That freewheeling, move fast and break things attitude that got them started suddenly becomes a liability when you need to serve millions of cautious customers who demand reliability above all else.
Precisely. It must be incredibly jarring for the original team members who loved that early culture.
I bet. What else changes in this molting?
Well, the very direction of innovation has to be redirected. In the early market, the focus is all on those revolutionary visions, right? Pushing boundaries, creating groundbreaking, maybe sometimes unpolished features.
Mm-hmm.
But to cross the chasm, that creative energy needs to be channeled towards a pragmatist's value system. What does that mean? It means focusing innovation on solving the practical, everyday, pressing problems of the mainstream customer.
Less blue sky, more boots on the ground.
Exactly. Ensuring impeccable reliability, making it incredibly easy to use, ensuring it integrates seamlessly with all the systems they already have. It's about making the new technology, honestly, kind of boringly reliable for the masses.
Boringly reliable. I like that.
Yeah.
Not necessarily exciting, but dependable.
Dependable is key for the pragmatist. It's less about the whiz-bang features and more about, does this solve my problem without causing new ones? Think about a company like LinkedIn. They had to manage both a consumer product and an enterprise product, serving very different needs, requiring different innovation focuses. That shows how a company might need to split its focus during this molting.
Okay, but shifting focus like that, valuing boring reliability over dashing performance,
Right.
that must cause huge internal friction, right? Maybe even resentment.
Oh, absolutely. The people who were the heroes in the early days, the brilliant innovators, the risk takers, they might suddenly find themselves out of step. Their skills might feel less valued compared to skills around process, quality control, customer support.
Their definition of good work changes.
It does, and the source material is blunt about this. It says, this process can and will test friendships and egos throughout the firm. You have to reevaluate the very skills and instincts and talents that help to build a winning position in the early market.
So the people who got you to the chasm might not be the right people to get you across it, or they need to change fundamentally.
That's often the implication. It leads to tension, resistance, really difficult decisions for leadership. It's a painful but ultimately necessary evolution for the company to survive and scale. It's like moving from a purely creative, exploratory phase to a much more disciplined, execution-focused phase.
You can imagine the resistance. Think of a small software company where the developers were stars for pushing boundaries. Now they're being asked to prioritize bug fixes, write detailed documentation, handle enterprise support calls.
Yeah, things that might feel less creative or heroic.
Right. But those things are absolutely essential for the pragmatist customer. The whole culture has to shift.
It's a huge shift. The cultural shock, the resistance from early employees who loved the original startup vibe, it can be immense. And that's why so many brilliant startups, despite nailing it with the early adopters, ultimately fail to scale. They just can't complete that deep internal molting process. The company itself fails to change its identity and its rhythm.
Okay, so understanding this massive internal shift, this corporate metamorphosis, it really shines a light on why just sticking with your early strategies is doomed to fail when you hit the mainstream.
Exactly. It's not just inefficient, it's often a recipe for disaster.
Right. So it sounds like the chasm isn't just about reaching a bigger market. It's like entering a completely different universe, one that demands a different kind of company, different product philosophy, a whole new playbook.
That's a good way to think about it.
So why specifically do those initial strategies, the ones that work so well with the visionaries, just fall completely flat when you try to use them to reach the mainstream pragmatists? What makes them antithetical, as Moore says?
Well, if we tie it all together, it becomes really clear, doesn't it? What works for fads and visionaries just cannot work for trends and pragmatists. The fundamental disconnect is rooted in those differing value systems and priorities we've been discussing. And the book is explicit. The techniques are antithetical. They're diametrically opposed. Companies have to consciously adapt their skills, their instincts, everything, away from the early market approach to meet the mainstream challenge. You can't just scale up what worked before.
So it's not just doing more of what brought you initial success, but actively doing different things. Maybe even things that feel contradictory to that early success. That must be a really hard mental shift for a company to make, especially when they're feeling good about their initial wins.
It's incredibly hard. Let's break down why those early strategies fail so badly at the chasm.
Okay.
First off, risk tolerance and proof points. We touched on this, but it's huge. Visionaries, they embrace risk for that potential reward. They tolerate unproven stuff. Pragmatists, they actively avoid risk. They prioritize safety, reliability, proven results.
So the marketing message has to change completely.
Completely. A message highlighting potential and groundbreaking innovation. That works for visionaries. It falls flat with pragmatists. They need hard evidence, testimonials, detailed case studies, maybe independent reviews, clear proof that people like them have already succeeded with this technology with minimal disruption. They want to see the risk has already been absorbed by others, basically.
They need the safety net as social proof.
Absolutely. Second, and this is a massive one, the whole product expectation.
Right. You mentioned this earlier.
Early adopters, the visionaries, they're often willing to kind of piece together a solution. They might integrate your core tech with other software, build custom workarounds, figure out how to fill the gaps themselves. Why? Because they're motivated by the core innovation itself. They'll do the extra work.
They're solving the whole product problem for you in a way.
Exactly. But mainstream customers, especially pragmatists, no way. They expect a complete, ready-to-use, turnkey solution. It needs to just work right out of the box. They do not want to be system integrators or beta testers.
So if your early marketing promises this amazing vision, but the actual product delivered is incomplete, needing lots of extra effort or add-ons, you will immediately repel the pragmatists.
Yeah.
They demand a seamless, integrated experience that solves their entire problem, not just one piece of it. This need for the complete solution, the whole product, is why just having a great core technology and a sales team isn't enough for the mainstream. You need the support, the training, the integrations, the whole ecosystem.
Oh. So, if your product isn't perfectly finished, polished, and wrapped up with all the necessary support and services, the mainstream just won't even look at it, no matter how cool the core tech is. That's a huge difference from the early market.
It's a monumental difference.
Yeah.
Third, the communication channels and the message itself. The whole way you talk about it has to change.
How so?
Well, we agreed word of mouth is key for everyone, but the kind of word of mouth is totally different. Early market buzz is all about excitement, right? Cutting edge features, new possibilities, the wow factor.
Mainstream market word of mouth. It's about proven reliability, practical benefits, low risk. And it's validated by trusted peers and maybe industry analysts, not just enthusiasts. A company that just keeps amplifying the early market excitement will find it doesn't resonate. It might even sound hypey and untrustworthy to the pragmatists.
They need a different kind of validation, proof that it's safe, reliable, widely adopted.
Exactly. You need to change the message and the context to speak directly to their fears and desires, reassuring them rather than just exciting them.
Okay.
And lastly,
finally, there's the focus. Features versus solutions. Visionaries often get excited by groundbreaking features. They love the technical capabilities, the what-if potential.
you're like lifting the hood and seeing the engine?
Yeah. Pragmatists.
Yeah.
They want to solve specific, pressing problems with minimal disruption. They care less about how the engine works and more about, does this car get me reliably from A to B with good gas mileage?
So, early marketing that just boasts about technical features or abstract potential. It completely misses the mark with the problem-solution-oriented mainstream. They need to hear, clearly and simply, how this thing solves their specific problem today with a clear ROI. Not what it could do in some theoretical future. They need tangible value, not just a technological marvel.
I see. So that initial energy and excitement from the early days, if it's not carefully redirected and refocused, it can actually backfire.
It absolutely can. It might lead to a product that's way too complex or too unpolished or maybe just too niche for broad appeal. That whole culture of rapid, maybe sometimes undisciplined innovation that defines so many startups, it needs to mature.
It's a fundamental maturation process for the product, the marketing, and the company itself.
Exactly. Think about a marketing campaign for a new AI tool. If it just talks about the revolutionary algorithms to impress early adopters, it might completely fail with a mainstream audience. That audience needs to see, maybe, how it reliably automates a boring, routine task they all hate, demonstrating clear, low-risk ROI for an everyday use case. Not how it achieves some theoretical breakthrough. The language, the channels, the proof points, everything has to shift to speak the pragmatist's language.
Which means the company has to fundamentally question its own assumptions about its product and its market.
Yeah.
Letting go of what made you successful initially to embrace what's needed next.
That's the heart of the molting process. It's challenging because, as other research shows, managers often operate based on past successes, not necessarily current realities. You have to actively fight that inertia.
Okay. So we've really unpacked these initial hurdles, the nature of discontinuous innovation, the big differences between early and mainstream customers, and why those early strategies just don't cut it for crossing the chasm.
Yeah, we've laid the groundwork, but this is really just the beginning of understanding the full journey described in the technology adoption lifecycle. #tag outro.
Wow. Okay, this has been a really incredible deep dive into just the initial concepts of crossing the chasm. It's so clear that just building a great new product is only like half the battle.
Hmm. Maybe less than half sometimes.
Yeah. Knowing who to sell it to and how to sell it to them at these different stages, that seems absolutely critical. We've seen how discontinuous innovation really demands these big behavioral shifts from users,
Yeah.
and how that visionary mindset of the early market just fundamentally clashes with the pragmatic mindset of the mainstream. It creates this huge gap, this chasm.
Absolutely. I think the core takeaway from today, really, is just how stark that difference is. The early market and the mainstream market are fundamentally different beasts. They require strategies that are not just different, but often diametrically opposed.
Right.
And ignoring that distinction, or maybe more importantly, failing to undergo that necessary molting process inside the company, that transformation of culture, priorities, even how you define innovation, that can absolutely doom a really promising technology before it ever gets a real chance to flourish broadly.
And that idea that the tactics for a fad are genuinely antithetical to those for a trend, that feels like a real game changer. If you're trying to bring any new idea to life, realizing it's not about doing more of what worked at first,
Mm-hmm.
but often doing something entirely different, maybe even something that feels counterintuitive based on your initial success, that's huge.
It is. And maybe this raises an important question for you, our listener, to think about. In your own experiences, maybe in tech, maybe in business, maybe even watching social movements, where have you seen a brilliant idea just get stuck? Get stuck because it couldn't make that leap from the initial excitement, the early adopters, to broader mainstream adoption. And thinking about it now, how might a molting process, a fundamental shift in strategy and mindset, maybe even in the company culture itself, have changed its fate? Could it have crossed the chasm with a different approach?
That's a great thought to leave people with. We'll definitely continue this exploration in our next deep dive into crossing the chasm. We'll look more closely at the full technology adoption life cycle and the specific strategies Moore proposes for actually making that leap.
Looking forward to it.